I think, I might throw to Sean. I think you touched on this. You said, one of the biggest challenges for brands looking to enter these markets is understanding who's the customer they're trying to target, and that's so key to this because understanding whether it's a lunchtime trade or a nighttime or weekends, and is it people working or people that live nearby, makes all the difference around a site location. Can you tell us a bit about, I guess, some of the challenges you might have seen from brands who are entering these markets for the first time, and the way that those consumers behave may be quite different to markets that they've been used to in the past?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Peter. This question comes up a lot. We have a lot of discussions with many international brands. Many of them are from the U.S., as you know. If you look on the background here, you'll see, Chuck E. Cheese. You'll see Little Caesars Pizza. You'll see Slim Chickens and Texas Roadhouse. And we just brought on board Hooters as well, Hooters of America. So we have the honor of helping them to expand through many countries here in this part of the world. Obviously there are a lot. It's a loaded question. We could spend a whole day talking about some of the challenges franchisors have when they seek to enter this part of the world, or in India or the GCC or anywhere else in the world. But obviously cultural differences. Asia is not one country, right? I mean, the areas that we cover is 20 or so countries. They each have their own cultures. They each have their own languages. And even when languages are similar or the same, they have different cultures and dialects and such, right? And so it's really, even within the same country, right? And, when you talk about Vietnam, Hanoi is very different from Ho Chi Minh City, just like Beijing is very different from Shanghai, right? So lots of cultural issues. There's regulatory issues that we won't get into today. And specifically in our case, regulatory issues related to franchising. Supply chain is always an important part of it, the discussion. Labor costs, not only labor costs, but productivity, right? So don't assume that because labor costs more that it's cheaper, because productivity tends to be higher in more of these more developed countries. So it more than offsets some of the higher costs in labor. But of course, countries like India, Vietnam, and many others throughout Asia, the Greater Asia region, there is obviously a labor efficiency advantage in many cases. Lots and lots of stuff, but I guess one of the key things I wanted to talk about was incomes, right? Because really, when you look at a country, one of the main challenges that any brand is going to have initially is, why should I be interested in this country? What is the market potential in the short term, in the near term, and of course in the long term, right? So if you take a look at an example of Vietnam short term, probably fairly okay, fairly interesting. Medium term, much better. Long term, very good, right? And so again, franchisors know that when they come into a country, they don't have to build 50 stores in 2 years, right? They got 10 years to do that. They have 5 years to do that. They have 20 years to do that. And when they come in with that realization, understanding what the potential is, and looking at the demographics but specifically the incomes of the target market, then they can start to understand, this is something that's interesting to me. This is something that should be worthwhile for me to invest further, to make additional investments before I actually go out and work with people like Sean and everybody else to actually find master franchisees throughout the region. And I guess the other thing that GapMaps does extremely well, and I think many of you guys have already alluded to this, is incomes are very different within a country itself, right? What you find is, the major metropolitan areas tend to be anywhere from 2 to 2.5, maybe even 3 times what the national GDP per income average is, right? And so again, as you head out of the major metropolitan areas, many companies, many governments, many organizations don't have data to say where they should expand to. And I think that's where market hunting, discovering the potential of the market, not only in the major cities, which are obvious, but making informed and very difficult decisions to choose between the 65 or 66 provinces in Vietnam, for example, and how to prioritize which markets I want to go to, what are the estimated income levels, what are the education levels, are there businesses there, et cetera, et cetera. Whatever that criteria is, when you have that data, then it makes sense to be able to choose the right market entry strategies, either by country or even within a country itself. So we see lots of opportunities in that. And, one of my first discussions when I ever talk to a franchisor that wants to get into Asia is, what do you think the market potential is? And the normal question is, and this is why it's very important for franchisers to do their due diligence. But right now, it's just basically, my competitors have so many businesses there, so I want to be a percentage of that, and that's okay. That should be one of the things that you look at. But that in it itself is not probably the best way to look at what the real market potential is, etc. So I think there's a lot of opportunities here. And I think GapMaps provides a lot of these decisions, especially when you can take those decisions on a 100-meter by 100-meter grid, which I've never heard of any other company being able to do.
Yeah, that sort of micro catchment's so important. People only travel so far to consume a particular good or service. So, got to understand at a micro level. Thanks, Sean.
I was just going to add to that. I mean, one of the challenges we see here with the American brands looking to establish a foothold is around the franchisor might not. They understand their business incredibly well, but they don't understand the geography. And also, there are many different types of relationships between franchisee, franchisor, and how, who has responsibility for finding sites, approving sites, what level of risk, is it a good site? So actually in instances where the franchisee who might be based in Dallas or somewhere else in America and the local franchisee who usually based in Saudi or Dubai here, if, as in some instances, the platform is used by both, it can become a single point of truth to manage that process and, help the franchisor based in another country understand the local geography, because, that it's a huge challenge, and the Middle East is a big place, and Americans wouldn't necessarily understand the culture, the traffic, the incomes, the data challenges that Andrew talked about, and all those things. So actually having a common platform and single point of truth is enormously useful for US-based brands coming into this region.
Yeah, thanks, Simon.